Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Zion's fingers trembled over the makeup brushes spread across the vanity. Heart pounding, he glanced nervously at the locked door, ears straining for any sign of footsteps in the hallway. The house remained silent, his parents still out for their weekly date night. Taking a deep breath, Zion picked up a tube of foundation, squeezing a small amount onto the back of his hand. He'd watched countless tutorials online, practicing the techniques in secret whenever he had a moment alone. With careful strokes, he began to apply the creamy liquid, blending it seamlessly into his skin. As the foundation evened out his complexion, Zion felt a flutter of excitement in his chest. He reached for the eyeshadow palette next, admiring the array of shimmering colors. Hesitating for only a moment, he selected a soft rose gold shade and began to dust it across his eyelids. The transformation continued, each brush stroke and careful application bringing Zion closer to the image he'd held in his mind for so long. Mascara lengthened his lashes, a hint of blush added a rosy glow to his cheeks, and a swipe of pink lipstick completed the look. Leaning back, Zion studied his reflection in the mirror. The person staring back at him was both familiar and wonderfully new. He tilted his head, admiring how the light caught the shimmer on his eyelids. A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, a sense of rightness settling over him. But the look wasn't complete yet. Zion stood, moving to his closet where he'd hidden a flowy skirt at the back, buried beneath piles of jeans and hoodies. He pulled it out, running his fingers over the soft fabric. It was a deep purple, scattered with tiny white flowers, a thrift store find that had called to him the moment he saw it. Slipping off his sweatpants, Zion stepped into the skirt, pulling it up and adjusting it at his waist. The material swished around his legs, a sensation both foreign and thrilling. He twirled experimentally, watching the skirt billow out around him. For a moment, Zion stood still, eyes closed, just breathing. He felt right, complete, as if all the scattered pieces of himself had finally clicked into place. Opening his eyes, he reached for his phone. He wanted to capture this moment, to have proof that this version of himself was real. Zion posed in front of the full-length mirror, angling the phone to get the best shot. After a few attempts, he finally captured an image that made his heart soar, a person looking back at him who felt true, who felt like home. Filled with a surge of courage, Zion decided to share the photo with his online friend, someone he'd met in a support group for gender-questioning teens. They'd been talking for months, sharing their fears and hopes. His friend had been the first person Zion had ever told about his desire to explore his gender identity. With slightly shaky hands, Zion opened his messaging app. He selected the photo and started to type a message to go along with it.
"Finally had the courage to try it all," he wrote. "What do you think?"
His thumb hovered over the send button. A knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. What if his friend didn't like it? What if they thought he looked ridiculous? Zion shook his head, trying to silence the doubts. His friend had always been supportive. They'd understand. Taking a deep breath, Zion pressed send. The message whooshed away, and Zion let out a sigh of relief. He set the phone down, planning to give his friend time to respond. But almost immediately, his phone pinged with a new message. Eagerly, Zion picked up the phone. His heart stopped. The message hadn't gone to his friend. Instead, staring back at him from the screen, was his mother's name. In his nervousness, he'd selected the wrong contact. Panic seized him. The room seemed to spin as the implications hit him. His mother had seen the photo. She knew. Everything he'd kept hidden, every secret he'd guarded so carefully, had just been exposed in a single, careless moment. Zion's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the phone. He stared at the screen, waiting for the angry response, the shocked questions, the disappointment he was sure would follow. Seconds ticked by, feeling like hours. Zion's mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. Would his parents kick him out? Send him to therapy to fix him? Would his mother cry, asking where she'd gone wrong? The phone buzzed. A new message appeared. With his heart in his throat, Zion opened it, bracing himself for the worst.
Zion, sweetheart, you look beautiful. Can we talk when I get home?
Zion read the message once, twice, 3 times. He blinked, sure he must be misreading it, but the words remained the same. Beautiful. His mother had called him beautiful. Tears welled up in Zion's eyes, blurring his carefully applied mascara. He sank down onto his bed, clutching the phone to his chest. Of all the reactions he'd imagined, this hadn't been one of them. The next hour passed in a haze of emotion. Zion alternated between pacing his room and sitting on the edge of his bed, phone clutched tightly in his hand. He considered washing off the makeup, changing back into his regular clothes. But something stopped him. His mother had seen him, really seen him, and her first reaction had been to call him beautiful. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made Zion freeze. Footsteps on the stairs, then a gentle knock at his door. "Zion, can I come in?" Taking a deep breath, Zion stood. "Yeah, Mom, come in." The door opened slowly. Zion's mother stepped in, her eyes immediately finding her child. For a moment, she simply looked at Zion, taking in the makeup, the skirt, the nervous posture. Then she smiled. It was a soft smile, tinged with something Zion couldn't quite name. Surprise, perhaps, or wonder. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice gentle. "You really do look beautiful." The dam broke. Tears spilled down Zion's cheeks as he rushed into his mother's arms. She held him tightly, one hand stroking his hair as he cried. "I'm sorry," Zion choked out between sobs. "I didn't mean to send that picture. I was scared. I thought you'd hate me." His mother pulled back slightly, cupping Zion's face in her hands. "Hate you? Sweetheart, I could never hate you. You're my child. I love you, no matter what." Zion hiccuped, trying to stem the flow of tears. "But it's not normal. I'm not normal." "Normal is overrated," his mother said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "What matters is that you're you, and I want to know you, all of you." She guided Zion to sit on the bed, taking a seat beside him. "How long have you been feeling this way?" Zion took a shaky breath. "A while," he admitted. "I've always felt different, like I was playing a role that didn't quite fit. When I put on makeup, when I wear clothes like this, it feels right, like I'm finally being true to myself." His mother nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "Have you thought about a different name? Different pronouns?" The question caught Zion off guard. He'd thought about it, of course, but had never dared to voice it aloud. I like Zoe," he said softly. "And she, her pronouns feel right." "Zoe," his mother repeated, testing out the name. "It's a beautiful name. It suits you." Zoe, because that's who she was, who she'd always been, felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "You're really okay with this?" Her mother squeezed her hand. "I won't pretend I'm not surprised, or that I understand everything. But I love you, Zoe. And I want you to be happy, to be true to yourself. We'll figure this out together, okay? Zoe nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. But these were tears of relief, of joy, of a burden finally shared. Now, her mother said, a twinkle in her eye, why don't you show me how you did that eyeshadow? It looks amazing. Zoe laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of pure happiness. Sure, Mom. I'd love to. As they moved to the vanity, Zoe catching her reflection in the mirror, she saw herself, truly saw herself, for the first time. The girl looking back at her was still new, still uncertain, but she was real. She was Zoe. And with her mother's support, she was ready to embrace that truth. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of conversations, tears, and laughter. Zoe's father, initially shocked, came around after long talks with both Zoe and her mother. He stumbled over pronouns sometimes, but his efforts to understand and support his daughter were clear. Zoe began to explore her identity more openly at home. Her mother took her shopping, helping her pick out clothes that made her feel comfortable and confident. They spent hours in her room, experimenting with different makeup looks and hairstyles. One afternoon, as Zoe twirled in front of the mirror in a new sundress, her mother watched with a smile. You know, she said, I always wondered why you never seemed comfortable in your own skin. Now I understand. You're blooming, Zoe. It's beautiful to watch. Zoe blushed, smoothing down the skirt of her dress. I feel like I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be, she admitted. But I'm scared too. What about school? My friends? What if people don't accept me? Her mother's expression turned serious. There may be challenges ahead, she acknowledged. Not everyone will understand. But you have us, Zoe. We'll face those challenges together. As the new school year approached, Zoe and her parents had many discussions about how to handle her transition at school. They met with the principal and counselor, who were supportive but cautioned that not everyone might be as accepting. The night before the first day of school, Zoe stood in front of her closet, anxiety gnawing at her stomach. She'd decided to go to school as herself, as Zoe, but now, faced with the reality of it, fear threatened to overwhelm her. A knock at her door pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. Come in, she called. Her father entered, a small gift bag in his hand.
Hey, kiddo. Thought you might like this for tomorrow.
Curious, Zoe opened the bag. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a butterfly. She gasped softly, running her fingers over the intricate design. It's beautiful, she whispered. Her father smiled, a bit awkwardly but with genuine warmth. I thought it fit. You know, with the whole transformation thing. Plus, butterflies are tough little creatures. Beautiful, but strong. Tears pricked at Zoe's eyes as she hugged her father tightly. Thank you, Dad. I love it. He hugged her back, then held her at arm's length. You've got this, Zoe. Remember, you're not alone. We're here for you, no matter what. The next morning, Zoe stood at the entrance to her high school, heart pounding. She'd chosen a simple outfit, jeans, a flowy top, and just a touch of makeup. The butterfly necklace rested against her collarbone, a reminder of her family's support. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the doors and stepped inside. The hallway bustled with activity, students catching up after the summer break. A few people glanced her way, some doing double takes as they recognized her. Zoe kept her head high, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. She made her way to her locker, fumbling with the combination as whispers started to spread around her. Is that Zion? What's he wearing? I think it's a she now. The murmurs grew, some curious, some confused, a few decidedly unfriendly. Zoe's hands shook as she tried to organize her books. Well, look who decided to play dress-up. The sneering voice made Zoe's blood run cold. She turned to see Brad, a boy who'd bullied her in the past, flanked by his usual group of friends. Their expressions ranged from amused to disgusted.
What's the matter, Zion? Couldn't hack it as a boy?
Brad taunted. Zoe felt her throat tighten, words failing her. She'd prepared for this, had rehearsed responses in her head, but faced with the reality, she found herself frozen. Just as Brad opened his mouth to continue his tirade, another voice cut through the growing crowd. Her name is Zoe, and I think she looks great. Lily, a girl Zoe knew from her art class, stepped forward. She smiled at Zoe, then turned to face Brad, her expression hardening.
Got a problem with that?
Brad faltered, clearly not expecting the interruption. He glanced around, noticing that the crowd's mood had shifted. More students were frowning at him now, not at Zoe.
Whatever, he muttered, backing down.
Freak show's not worth my time anyway. As Brad and his cronies slunk away, Lily turned back to Zoe. You okay? Zoe nodded, finding her voice at last. Yeah, thank you. That was really cool of you. Lily shrugged, smiling. No big deal. Us girls have to stick together, right? She linked her arm through Zoe's. Come on, let's get to class. I want to hear all about your summer. As they walked down the hallway, Zoe felt a warmth spread through her chest. The day wouldn't be easy. There would be more stares, more whispers, more explanations to give. But she wasn't alone. She had her family's love, Lily's unexpected friendship, and most importantly, she had herself, her true self. The butterfly necklace caught the light as they turned a corner, its wings seeming to flutter with possibility. Zoe touched it gently, a small smile playing on her lips. She was spreading her wings, ready to fly into this new chapter of her life. It wouldn't always be smooth sailing, but for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the weeks passed, Zoe found her footing in her new identity at school. There were difficult moments, confused teachers, insensitive comments, the occasional dirty look in the hallway. But there were also surprising allies and moments of joy. Lily became a constant presence at her side, fiercely protective and endlessly supportive. Other friends from before her transition, after initial shock, rallied around her. The art teacher, Ms. Chen, pulled Zoe aside after class one day to tell her how proud she was of Zoe's courage. At home, things continued to evolve. Family dinners became a time for open discussions about gender, identity, and the challenges Zoe faced. Her parents asked questions, eager to understand and support their daughter better. One evening, as they cleared the dinner table, Zoe's mother broached a new topic. Honey, your father and I have been talking. We think it might be good for you to talk to someone, a therapist who specializes in gender identity issues. Zoe tensed, nearly dropping the plate she was carrying.
You think there's something wrong with me? No,
her father quickly interjected.
That's not it at all. We just think it might help to have someone to talk to who really understands what you're going through. Someone who can give you tools to deal with the challenges you're facing. Zoe considered this, relaxing slightly. I guess that makes sense, she admitted. It would be nice to talk to someone who gets it. Her mother smiled, relieved. We've found someone highly recommended, Dr. Patel.
Would you like to meet her?" Zoe nodded, a mix of nervousness and curiosity stirring in her stomach. The following week, Zoe found herself sitting in Dr. Patel's office, fidgeting with the hem of her skirt. The therapist was a kind-faced woman with warm brown eyes and a soothing voice.
"So, Zoe," Dr. Patel began, "tell me a bit about yourself. How has your journey been so far?"
At first, Zoe's responses were hesitant, guarded. But as Dr. Patel listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions, Zoe found herself opening up. She talked about the years of confusion, the joy of finally understanding herself, the fear of coming out, the relief of her parents' acceptance.
"It sounds like you've been on quite a journey," Dr. Patel said warmly. "How are you feeling now?"
Zoe considered the question. "Lighter," she said finally. "Like I can breathe easier, but also scared. There's so much uncertainty ahead." Dr. Patel nodded understandingly.
"That's completely normal, Zoe. Transition is a big step, with many aspects to consider. We'll work together to help you navigate this path, at whatever pace feels right for you."
As the session continued, they discussed coping strategies for dealing with bullying, ways to build self-confidence, and the various options for medical transition that Zoe might want to consider in the future. By the end of the hour, Zoe felt a new sense of calm. She had a lot to think about, but for the first time, the future didn't seem quite so daunting. As autumn turned to winter, Zoe continued to grow into herself. Regular sessions with Dr. Patel helped her process her emotions and build resilience. At school, while there were still occasional rough patches, she found herself surrounded by a small but fierce group of friends who accepted her completely. One crisp Saturday afternoon, Zoe was sprawled on her bed, textbooks spread around her as she struggled with math homework. A knock at her door provided a welcome distraction. "Come in," she called, grateful for the break. Her mother entered, a mischievous smile on her face. "I've got a surprise for you," she announced. "Get your coat." Intrigued, Zoe followed her mother downstairs and out to the car. They drove for about 20 minutes, finally pulling up in front of a small, cheerful-looking salon. "What's this?" Zoe asked, confusion evident in her voice. Her mother's smile widened. "I made an appointment for you with Maria. She's an old friend of mine, and she's amazing with hair. I thought you might like to try a new style, something that feels more you." Zoe's heart leapt. She'd been wanting to grow her hair out, to style it in a more feminine way, but hadn't known how to broach the subject. Inside the salon, they were greeted warmly by Maria, a vivacious woman with a shock of purple hair. "So," she said, looking at Zoe with a twinkle in her eye, "your mom tells me you're ready for a change. What did you have in mind, sweetheart?" Zoe hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She'd saved pictures of hairstyles she liked, but had been too nervous to show anyone. Now she scrolled through them, showing Maria her favorites. Maria nodded approvingly. "I love these. How about we combine elements from a couple of them? We can add some long layers to give you movement, and maybe some side-swept bangs. It'll frame your face beautifully." Excitement bubbled up in Zoe's chest. "Yes, please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The next hour was a blur of snipping scissors, the whir of a blow-dryer, and the gentle tug of a brush through her hair. Zoe kept her eyes closed, letting herself be lulled by the sounds of the salon and the easy chatter between her mother and Maria. Finally, Maria announced, "Okay, honey, ready to see the new you?" Zoe opened her eyes. The person staring back at her from the mirror took her breath away. Her hair fell in soft waves around her face, the new layers giving it body and movement she'd never had before. The side-swept bangs softened her features, making her look undeniably feminine. "Oh," she breathed, reaching up to touch a strand in wonder. Her mother appeared behind her, eyes shining with tears. "You look beautiful, Zoe." Zoe stood, turning this way and that to see her new hairstyle from all angles. For the first time, her outside truly matched how she felt inside. She threw her arms around Maria, thanking her profusely, then hugged her mother tightly. As they left the salon, Zoe couldn't stop running her fingers through her hair, marveling at how different she felt. Her mother watched her with a soft smile. "You know," she said as they got in the car, "I was thinking, how would you feel about redecorating your room? Make it a space that really feels like Zoe's room, not Zion's." Zoe's eyes widened. "Really? You'd let me do that?" Her mother laughed. "Let you? Honey, I'll help you. It's time for a change, don't you think?" The next few weekends were a flurry of activity. Zoe and her mother pored over paint samples, debated curtain patterns, and scoured thrift stores for unique decorative pieces. Her father got into the spirit too, offering to build her a new vanity where she could store her growing makeup collection. As the room transformation progressed, so did Zoe's confidence. She began experimenting more with her style, mixing and matching pieces to create looks that felt authentically her. She even started a blog, sharing her experiences as a trans teen and offering makeup and fashion tips.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!